we'll do the roll call. Mr. Holland and I are here. Dr. Bolland, are you online?
I'm here.
Jason is replacing Emma Pocon on the committee. Are you online, Jason?
I'm here.
Sure. Zelatel is replacing Senator Cross, and
there'll be a new alternate named after the 23rd, and Mr. Littlefield is sworn in.
okay,
Thank you.
So we have a quorum, and everybody's present, all five of us. Aaron, can you help us out with the public involvement announcement, please?
Yes, again, meetings are open to the public, and the public has provided an opportunity to comment at each meeting. Business items are first presented by a staff or consultant, then the committee is given an opportunity to discuss the business item. The public is invited to formally comment after the discussion. Each participant will have 3 minutes to speak on their topic. A couple of housekeeping items. If you're joining us virtually and you're not a member of the committee, please turn off your camera when you're not speaking on an item. If you're joining us by phone, to mute and unmute the microphone, press *6. Thank you.
Aaron, do we have approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second. By the Zelatel, second. Colhase. Do we have any changes? Hearing none, are there any adopting the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. For agenda item number 4, we have before us the minutes of the March 21st, 2024 meeting for approval. Do we have a motion to approve?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Colhase. Seconded by Ms. Zelatel. Any changes or discussion? I'm not going to propose a change, but as I was reading through this morning, I think I said something to the effect of, we didn't want the assembly to legislate laws, which I think functions, so I misspoke there. I think my point was that maybe they aren't traffic engineering experts, but anyway, I'm not proposing a change, but I acknowledge that I misspoke. Are there any objections to approving the minutes? Hearing none, March 21st, 2024 meetings are approved. Action item number 5A is the 2023 to 2026 TIP Amendment number 2 Air Quality Conformity Demonstration. Do you have a presentation here?
Yes, I'll be going over this item. First, I want to acknowledge a quick name change with this item. We used to call it determination, but we call it demonstration now. It was pointed out to us by FHWA and FTA that we do not make the determination ourselves as AMATS. We do the demonstration and then send it forward for approval, and FHW and FTA make the determination itself. So just a small little minor name change. It's still the same thing for us on our end. So as you know, we have TIP Amendment number 2 that was brought before this committee back in December and then released for public comment in January. Accompanying that is the air quality conformity demonstration, which is used to determine if any of the projects or changes in the TIP will impact our ability to maintain air quality, such as implementing our control measures from the statewide implementation plan. Just spell out all the acronyms for everybody from now on. An interagency consultation meeting took place on October 25th, 2023. It involved EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, FHWA, FTA, DOT, the MUNI, AMATS staff, and additional DOT staff to review the changes in TIP Amendment number 2. And the demonstration was developed after that interagency consultation took place. The demonstration was released for a 45-day public comment period, and no comments were received. The Technical Advisory Committee reviewed the air quality conformity demonstration and had no changes and recommended approval. This document is before you today to be approved. And just remember, it has to be approved prior to the TIP itself being approved, as this basically demonstrates that we are fiscally constrained and we will not negatively impact air quality. Thank you.
Aaron, are there any comments or questions from the committee? Hearing none, do we have any comments from the public? Hearing none. What is the will of the committee?
Move to approve.
By Ms. Soto, second. Seconded by Mr. Colhase. Do I hear any objections to approving the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved. Action item 5B on is the 2023 to 2026 TIP Amendment number 2. And I know Aaron has a presentation. If you'll humor me, Aaron, I just have 3 things that I think we should cover. I've had a high level of frustration kind of figuring out both the process and the strategy maybe. And I think that frustration is probably mostly with myself, just I'm having a real hard time understanding it. So I'm operating on full trust of staff here, you know, I know you guys know what you're doing. But my understanding is that, you know, just like back that we're removing all the NHS projects from the TIP, that they will return with the next TIP amendment, because those documents have to align. It's a fiscal constraint. You know, and I'm not a transportation. I think my main point is I'm not a transportation planner, you know, but I've been working in this environment for 20 years. And if I can't understand the process, then I think it's a big ask of the public to be able to understand the process. So maybe if you could, I'm sure you will, but if you could explain some of that process as you go through the changes, that would be helpful, because I think the process is going to delay several projects that have some good things in them. Number 2, the vast majority of the comments that we received on this latest round were from Eagle River. And again, understand that Highland is being removed from the TIP, but it will return once there's room for it in the STEP. Number 2, non-committal of course, but I think that the DOT will have a design start for the artillery interchange here in the near future. And again, that will have to get into the process. But the big question, the hard question I think that I have for you is there a reason that Eagle River projects don't score well with our scoring criteria? Is there a theme there? And so is it something in the scoring criteria that doesn't help them out, or is it just not many projects are nominated? But if you can maybe just generally speak to that, that would be helpful. And then last is 3rd, which it looks like we have a correction here in front of us, is that if you've explained what an illustrative project is and you know, how a project might benefit from having that rather than being totally removed from the TIP. I appreciate it.
Okay, yeah,
Thank you.
I have them written down, so if I miss them, please let me know, and I think I'll address all of them except for the criteria one, talking about the memo, but I'll talk about the criteria as well. So, okay, so before you is TIP amendment number 2. So this did come before you all back in December, as I said earlier. It was released for a 45-day public comment period that also included a public hearing at the Anchorage Assembly. 50 comments were received for the public, and those are outlined in the attached comment response summary, along with 33 edits from staff based on public comments and project status updates. The Technical Advisory Committee did review Amendment 2 and recommended one change to multi-use pathway from Tudor Road to Northern Lights Boulevard to change it to illustrative. So that kind of goes to that illustrative discussion. I'll get there in just a second when I talk about it. Overall changes. One of the big changes we are making with TIP Amendment 2 is moving all illustrative projects from the TIP tables and putting them into Appendix C in the TIP narrative, which is also part of the agenda today for approval. The reason for that is when you move a project from the TIP into illustrative, it essentially removes it from the TIP tables. We use our TIP tables as our fiscal analysis to determine what projects we're going to be doing in the next 4 years and what funding is going to those projects. Illustrative projects have no funding to them and are not part of the TIP tables. It was causing some confusion because people were like, oh, this project's in the TIP, it should be moving forward, even though it's illustrative. And so the idea here is try to help with some clarification. So real quick, what illustrative projects are, or how we as AMATS are using illustrative. And I have a little thing here, but I'll kind of just read from it. It's a way to show projects that have an immediate need, but there's not sufficient funding or staff time to implement the project. So putting a project on the illustrative list is basically saying, these are our next priorities, and by our, I mean the policy committee, priorities of projects that should be considered if future funding or staff time comes available. So, you know, Hopefully, this will help clear up some things for some people. It kind of came out during our certification review that we need to do kind of a better job at defining what's in our fiscal analysis and what's not. So that's the change here for the illustrative projects being moved out of the TIP tables into the appendix. Table 1, we updated the summary to include the carry forward funding for STBG, Surface Transportation Block Grant, CRP, Carbon Reduction Program, and TAP, Transportation Alternatives Program. This is part of our requirement for fiscal analysis as well, just to show our revenue and cost together. We were showing the cost side of the carry forward projects or carry forward funding, but I had missed a couple of the revenue lines. Just so you're aware, what carry forward is if we have any additional funding remaining at the end of the fiscal year that is not obligated, it is in essence carry forward to future years where AMATS is given an opportunity to obligate it towards other projects. So it helps ensure that AMATS remains whole if something like a project slips last minute and we are able to move that money into another project to absorb it. Next is table 2. Sorry, I'm kind of going through just because there's a lot, and stop me at any point if you need. Table 2, Spenard Road Rehabilitation, reduce the STBG funding and increase the carry forward funding. So basically, we're just using the carry forward funding to help offset some of our FY26 funding and use up our carry forward funding. Spenard Road Rehabilitation, increase the funding in FY24 for right-of-way from 2.5 to 5 million. East 4th Avenue Signal and Lighting Upgrade, reflect funding in FY24 for design and right-of-way and move the utilities and construction to FY25. This is at request of the project team. Potter Drive Rehabilitation, add 800,000 in FY24 for design. Mountain Drive, reduce the beyond FY26 from 13 million to 11.5 million to reflect the updated cost estimate based on a request from the project. Academy Vanguard Drive, move the FY26 right-of-way funding to beyond FY26. This was done in discussion with Muni PM&E because of the Seward Highway Diamond to O'Malley project slowdown. Non-motorized pavement preservation. Motorized pavement preservation, increase funding in FY24 by 500,000, reduce funding in FY25 about in half, so a little over half, and then increase funding in FY26 to 8.150 million from 865. Basically, what we did there is we shifted funding around to help ensure a fiscal constraint and move pavement projects from one year to the next. So we slipped pavement projects from FY25 to FY26. Chugach Rehabilitation, increased funding in FY26 by 400,000 and to reduce beyond 26 funding by 200,000 to update current cost estimates. 3rd Avenue Signals and Lighting Upgrade, move 100,000 from FY24 to FY25 for design. 32nd Avenue Upgrade, add 1.0 million to FY25 for design. And then the 5th Avenue Signals and Lighting Upgrade, move that project to illustrative as there's no funding in FY26 available. And I can kind of explain what's happening, why there's been such a big shift. And it has to relate to the non-motorized table. Non-motorized table, the significant changes here, downtown trail connection is moved from the design, the right-of-way utilities and construction has moved from FY24 to FY25. There was a slip in that project as we were waiting for the Alaska Railroad to do some bridge work, and they were unable to get that done in time, so we had to move the project out. That meant that we had to find funding in FY25 to cover this cost, and then it freed up funding in FY24. And so some of these shifts that you're seeing, like 5th Avenue Signals was delayed because it also accommodate the downtown trail connection. Fish Creek Trail had to move from FY25 to FY26. And so to help with those accommodations, some projects had to slip or rearrange. Active transportation pavement replacement, decreased funding in FY25 from 2.3 to 2.2, and then decreased funding in FY26 from 4.76 million to 50,000. What I don't list here, and I will try and do a better job in the future, is indicate where that funding goes to. In this case, the active transportation pavement replacement project in FY26 stayed in the non-motorized table because it was used to help accommodate the utilities and construction for the Fish Creek Trail in FY26. I will note that some of the funding in FY24 from the non-motorized table did move to the roadway table to help cover the increase in Spenard Road Rehabilitation and the pavement preservation. However, the vast majority of that funding was moved to the transit table, which I'll talk about here, or the CMAQ table for transit projects, which we'll talk about here shortly. Adding a new project in based on public feedback and what funding was available. The Eagle River Road Pathway Project, Eagle River Loop Road to Mile High Avenue. It's about 2 miles of a pathway. You may recall that the recommendation was to remove the Eagle River Road Rehabilitation Project as the $60 million price tag was too expensive for the TIP at this time and the anticipated future funding that'll be available. However, based on public feedback, there was a desire to try and keep some of that project moving forward. And the recommendation is to add the pathway portion at this location. It does line up with, I think, a school or two in the area, and does fit within our available budget. Table 4, plans and studies. There were 3 updates here. I'll talk about kind of all at one. Tudor Road Corridor Plan, Northern Lights Boulevard Benson Corridor Plan, and A Street Corridor Plan, adding an additional $200,000 each year for those plans. DOT did reach out as they are currently working on the Minnesota and INL corridor plan and requested additional funding for the future plans, as additional funding was going to be needed for some of the modeling work that's going to be done as part of those corridors. We were able to accommodate this, and it's reflected in the tables. CMAQ, Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Table. So as I said, a lot of the money in FY24 that was freed up because of the slippage of the downtown trail connection was moved to transit projects in the CMAQ table. The first being bus stop and facility improvements, added $6 million to that project in STBG funding in in 24. In FY24, increased the capital vehicles project by $3.415 million. Demo operations and expansion increased funding in FY24 to $560,000 of CRP funding. And then the Multoon Transit Mixed Use Hub Development add a utilities construction funding hit in FY24. Pavement replacement, the recommendation here, working with Parks and Rec, is to add an additional pavement project for the active transportation program, and that's the Sitka Street Park Pathway. There are no termini listed, as I missed that when bringing this forward. So we do have a recommendation to update the termini to include, it's from Orca Street to Lake Otis Parkway. So it's the entire length in that section. Table 7, update Table 7 to include project descriptions for all HSIP projects. Thank you, DOT, for providing that for us. We really appreciate that. Hopefully going forward, we can have that in the tips when we start the tip cycle, so we don't have to do it at a later date. Table 8. So I'll try and address the comments you had or questions you had, Sean, here. If I don't, please let me know. Table 8, updating the NHS table to move those projects, all the projects that are listed in illustrative, to show them as illustrative instead of removing them entirely from the TIP. As I said before, illustrative is a way to show that these are kind of the next priority projects for consideration. This table was changed in discussion with DOT. I met with the Deputy Commissioner of DOT and then a few others from the planning group to talk about this. One of the reasons this is being done is because the partially approved STIP does not show any funding for NHS projects within the MPO boundary. And part of our requirement as AMATS is have a fiscally constrained TIP. And so I was having issues when I was looking at this because I couldn't see where the money was located in the STIP. And after working with DOT, their recommendation was to show these illustrative for now until that could be corrected. The reason there's so much confusion is because of the corrective actions that FHWA put forward on the STIP recently, which was that you cannot have projects in the TIP and the STIP within the MPO boundary. They can only be in the TIP. In the past, AMATS would rely on the STIP to show us what the fiscal constraint was for DOT-funded projects, such as the NHS projects. And so we could always reference the TIP tables or STIP tables and say, okay, they say this amount of funding is going to be available. Let's reflect it in our TIP. That's adjusted. So now we, AMATS staff and DOT, are trying to figure out the process of how to get the fiscal constraint information to be able to accurately reflect that in the TIP tables. I do, as was said earlier, want to point out, changing these to illustrative does not mean these projects are gone. They are anticipated to come back in the future. I don't know when, I don't know what that'll look like, but just a heads up on that. And then table 10, other federal and state funded projects within the AMATS area. Working with DOT again, there was a request to update the project description for this international airport charging stations. It lists a couple of airports or locations that are outside the AMATS area. So it was requested that we just include the airport that's within the AMATS area in that project description. So that is the change for that one. Okay, and then as a reminder, the Technical Advisory Committee reviewed Amendment 2 and recommended approval with one change, and that was to change the multi-use pathway from Tudor Road to Northern Lights Boulevard to illustrative. And then there are 3 changes that staff brought forward that were forgotten about until just the other day, so I kind of want to walk through those real quick. And it's on this handout that you all have and is also available for the public. Sorry, it's not online for everybody. First, let's change the title of the AMATS interim 2050 MTP update. Staff recently was going through the federal regulations and discovered that an interim update is actually a federally designated process if you are not going to meet, or if you have not met your air quality conformity determination and you are in the middle of a lapse. So if you miss your air quality and you're in the middle of a lapse for an update, you can do an interim update, which is kind of a truncated process. That's not the intent with this update. This update is to do the full-blown process like normal. So the recommendation is to change it from the AMATS interim 2050 MTP update to AMATS 2052 MTP update. I just extended a couple of years and updated through the next 4-year cycle. Sorry for the confusion there. And then update the Sitka Park pathway termini to reflect Orca Street to Lake Otis Parkway. And then to add the following explanation to the TIP narrative on page 12 under section 2.7.4 about illustrative project explanation. Illustrative is a way to show projects that have an immediate need, but there's not sufficient funding or staff time available to implement the project. Putting a project on the illustrative list indicates that it is a project that should be considered first when funding or staff time becomes available. Moving a project in the current TIP tables to illustrative removes it from the TIP and can only be added back again as part of an amendment. Thank you. That was a lot, so thank you for bearing with me.
Do we have any questions or comments from the committee? Member Zelenthal.
Yeah, so I have a couple of questions about the CMAQ funding, and I know Ms. Action is here. So I'm curious, by adding the money to the bus stop and facility improvements and the money to capital vehicles, it's a considerable amount for each. Are you able to do anything with regard to snow with that money, either with capital vehicles, add a plow to a truck, or get yourself some equipment, or any of those facility improvements, you know, so they could shed snow better? We have had a considerable amount of snow-related access issues with regard to bus stops. So I guess I'd like to know a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, Jamie Acton, Public Transportation Director. So I appreciate the comments about the snow removal because we know that to be very true, to be an accessibility issue. So as it relates to this funding and where it is in the table, on table 5, these are pretty much dedicated to those actual activities. So the capital vehicles, the plan there is for fleet replacement of the 40-foot buses. We are trying to bring that up to at least 50% turnover to bring our useful life down. As it relates to bus stop and facility improvements, yes, we absolutely are looking at how we can have better shelters. We actually have a procurement that came through the assembly, I believe it was last week, for a new shelter purchase. We have recently updated our amenity guidelines that identifies where shelters would be placed and what level of amenities will go there. So those funding will help with those activities. I do want to point to table 9. There is a line item in there, and I think we've talked about this previously. The money that is in table 5 will allow us to free up money in table 9 that does identify snow removal equipment. So that is our plan for snow removal equipment. There's also several kind of additional steps that we'll need to deal with because our site enhancement team does not have in their PCNs, in their position descriptions, that they will operate specialized snow removal equipment. So that will be something that we will need to address with HR. Right now they use snow blowers, they hand dig, they do things like that, but removal also of the snow outside of the bus pad is work that we will have to address with either the state or the other unions and things like that. So those are all consideration items, but the funding does allow us to free up additional activities in the other tables. So that's where we would look to that.
Can I ask a quick follow-up question? Actually not a follow-up question, but a request. Can you email the labor part of that to me? That would be really helpful. And then I guess I'm getting into table 9.
Sorry, do you want the project number?
That'd be helpful, yes.
So it is under fleet improvement, support equipment, support vehicles. So typical purchases include pickup racks, maintenance,
Found it.
and all of that.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that information. I appreciate it.
Any other comments, questions from the committee?
Sean, I'm sorry, I forgot to answer one of your questions that you asked earlier about the criteria. Would you like me to answer that?
Yeah,
now?
please.
Okay, thank you. So you asked about Eagle River Road or Eagle River projects, Chugach Eagle River projects, and why they kind of typically fall lower in the scoring process. AMATS with this TIP cycle updated the TIP criteria. And that criteria's focus is on equity, environmental justice, a lot more on kind of like the immediate safety concerns that are out there that are identified through like Vision Zero or hopefully through the AMATS safety plan that was recently approved. And Eagle River does not have the same percentage or density of EJ populations out there. Additionally, the focus was to look at the 2040 land use plan and to focus projects on the areas where density is anticipated to occur. We did try to account for the land use plan that Chugach Eagle River has, but it had been a while since that's been updated. So just as a reminder, the criteria is only one tool that can be used for project selection. Everything goes to the policy committee for determination. And if projects don't score high enough, it is always within the policy committee's purview to put those projects into the TIP regardless of how they score. Good example is Mountain Air Drive. At that time, it was one of the lower scoring projects, but the policy committee felt that because of the emergency access needs of that project that could help address that it should be moved forward quicker. So I hope that helps answer your question.
I think it does. So the selection criteria are set for the period of this TIP, that 23 to 26. They'll be revisited coming into the 27 to whatever.
Yes, we do have the opportunity if there's a desire, and we plan on revisiting the criteria. There's a change that we're going to be recommending for the TIP process, because what we have always done is done a call for nominations before a TIP is constructed. And it's caused some confusion for the public because we do a nomination for the MTP, then we do a nomination for the TIP. Projects get nominated for the TIP that aren't in the MTP, and there's a lot of things there. So moving forward, we're going to recommend to just pull projects from the approved MTP and use those to build our future TIPs, because then we're in alignment there. And then we're trying to figure out what the criteria would look like regarding that, because we have pretty robust criteria for the 2050 MTP. So can we do something that's less labor intensive for the TIP selection itself? Still have some stuff in there, like, is there something we want to focus on more? EJ, land use, safety, that we can just target and say, is this project going to help with X, Y, and Z? So those discussions will be happening within the next year or so as we get ready for the next TIP cycle.
Thanks, yeah, that helps. Any other questions?
Sorry, I was hoping just to add on to a comment real quick for Ms. Zalathel.
Yeah.
I do just want to reference that the site enhancement crew that manages the bus stop is a team of 4. We are down to 1 right now. So that is very challenging. We just lost 1 to Parks and Rec, and we lost 1 to become a mechanic, which I'm not displeased with because I also need those, but it does leave us very lean. So, and that's not operation budget.
I actually had a follow-up for Ms. Acton.
Sorry.
So when you get this additional money in table 5, I see all of these have an MOA match. Do you have the additional match to meet the increased funding?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Online, have 2 more. I think I understand, but can you explain the consequences of not approving this TIP amendment today? Is there any benefit to wait until we can sync with the STIP? I think I understand that it delays other things in here that are
Mhm.
critical. But yeah, if you could help me with that.
Yeah, there are actually 2 things in here that is pretty important for TIP amendment number 2, and it is the 2 corrective actions that are related to the TIP and changes needed to be made that were part of the AMATS certification review that was done in 2023. The first is we need to show match for our projects, and the second is we can't have projects in our TIP that don't have funding within the 4 years of the fiscal constraint. So in order to address those, this TIP amendment is moving forward. Now, I'll just be hopefully clear on this. In order to get the TIP approved after the policy committee approves it, it has to be incorporated into the STIP. That is typically done via amendment. That can't happen at this point because of the tier 2 corrective actions that are currently out there that DOT has to address. Part of those tier 2 corrective actions are AMATS's certification corrective actions, which this TIP amendment will be helping to address. So delaying approval of the TIP amendment means we can't get those tier 2 corrective actions addressed, which it kind of delays everything, including the STIP process. I did not set it up that way. That is just how it's being communicated to me.
And I think my second question is related to that. So I can't remember when this TIP amendment started, but I feel like it started before I was on the policy board, and it's been 6 months. So these typically run 6 months for a TIP amendment.
Yeah, we've thankfully shortened it from the 8 or 9 months it took a while ago down to 4 to 6 months, and 4 months for the AMATS process, and then an additional 2 months, 1 to 2 months for DOT approval and then FHWA approval. And we have gotten requests or comments from FHWA that we need to work with DOT to help shorten our TIP amendment processes. I don't know what that looks like, but I'm sure we can have a robust discussion on that if you would like at some point.
And they can run it parallel to a certain extent, I'm sure. Yeah, okay.
I think so, yes.
Yeah.
One more question.
Yeah, wait.
So I see the Academy Drive Vanguard is moved FY26 right away to funding beyond FY26. I know it was already misaligned with the highway project, which I know is delayed right now. Would this put us further out of alignment, or is the intent to get them aligned if that highway project comes back?
I can't actually speak on this, but we do have a couple people here. There's Luke Boland and Russ Oswald with PM&E who can hopefully help speak on it. I've just reached out to them to find out what they need to do on this project.
Luke Boland, DOT Central Region Pre-Construction Engineer. So the intent with the rescoping of the O'Malley to Diamond project is to align with that Academy Vanguard. So I think there's flexibility in certain things right there, but making sure that those 2 project alliances is more important.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And we see Mr. Boland has his hand raised online.
Thank you. Just want to clarify, do we have a motion on the floor? Or are we back to committee discussion?
No, this is just the initial questions. We haven't done public comment or anything at this point.
Got it. Thank you.
But if there's no other questions or comments from the committee, I think we can open it up to comments from the public. Anybody that would like to comment from the public?
Starzik, DOT planning. I just wanted to speak to your point of what is the ramifications of not approving this TIP right now. A number of the items that are being addressed in this TIP amendment directly affect the continuation of projects. One really obvious one is the Spinard rehabilitation project, which is looking for an increase of funding to enter the right-of-way phase. Unless that funding is fully available, they can't open that right-of-way phase. So, and that just creates a delay in when it can go to construction. And from my discussions with that project engineer, that project manager, a 3-month delay might delay that construction for a full season. And there are other projects that have there are some impacts to timing. If this amendment, it can't be approved by the policy committee and incorporated into the STIP after we address the federal findings. So approving this now basically allows us to get it into the DOT process, advance it as far as we possibly can, so that when we do have resolution of the federal corrective actions, we can then just move it as quickly as possible, get that funding available, and let these projects continue on. And I unfortunately was unable to get all the information together, but at your next meeting, I will present a memo that kind of outlines what I see as any of the ramifications of not getting this adopted into the STIP in a timely manner. So look forward to that at your next meeting.
Any other comments, questions from the public? Please state your name and then, 3 minutes. So.
Okay, Mark Littlefield from Eagle River. I missed the first 30 minutes, I'm sorry, had the wrong time, but I'm gonna quote Aaron there. The updated selection criteria, Eagle River does not have the density to secure bigger numbers in the scoring process. And he also said that the selection criteria for Eagle, is going to be updated. We have a date on this, so we can actually have some input on that. Because if we're not going to score big, we're never going to get any of these AMATS projects.
Answer that, please.
Okay, yeah, there is an intent to possibly look at updating the criteria again. That's the intent of staff, but if the policy committee gives ultimate direction on that. So we'll be looking at that. And typically that does involve a public process where we put the criteria out to receive public comment.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Any other members from the public? Here, nobody online. Okay, public comment is closed. What is the will of the committee?
Move to approve the TIP amendment.
By Member Zoltel.
Second.
So are there any objections to approving the motion?
Actually, I have a question. Do we need to make an amendment to the TIP amendment to capture your 3 bullet points?
If you could, please, with any changes that you would like to see in there.
Okay, I would move to amend. Do you need me to say it all out loud, or is it because you've got it on paper, you're good, because you know what you need to go back and do?
We got it. We can capture it and put it into the minutes.
I move to amend the recommended amendments 1, 2, and 3 as presented by the AMATS coordinator.
Second.
Zoltel, seconded by Dr. Mullen. We can vote on the motion to amend.
Correct.
Do we hear any objections to the motion to amend? Hearing none, that passes. I guess there any further discussion on the main motion?
Yes, I would like to move an amendment as well. I would like to amend to remove from the TIP under Highway Safety Improvement Program, Project HSP 0014, which is Fifth Avenue, Concrete Street to Carlock Street pedestrian improvements. If I can get a
Can you
second.
tell us? Can you first tell me the where in the tip I can find it?
Table 7. It is
Thank
the
you.
third project.
All right, thank you. I'll second it for discussion purposes.
Thanks, appreciate that. Can I speak to it, Chair?
Please.
Thank you. So it's very helpful to have these descriptions added in for the HSIP or HSIP. I don't know how you guys say that, HSIP projects, because previously, I think this one would have sailed by us. Pedestrian improvements sounds like a really good thing, right? But from the description, certainly this project does not appear to be an improvement for pedestrians. The project description says install pedestrian median barrier between Concrete Street and the couplet of 5th and 6th Avenues. And so I think we've had a lot of discussion recently on a barrier, a pedestrian barrier that was added on Minnesota without, I would say, without robust public process and feedback, colloquially referred to as the Minnesota cheese grater. And I think that the local policymakers have been very clear that we want to, when it comes to safety interventions, yes, we want to make things safer for all users, whether that's motorized or non-motorized. However, we also want to support active transportation, and we want to have these interventions, be able to get, people can get where they're going, whatever their chosen method of travel is. We've had a lot of public pushback. We have 2 resolutions from community councils on the Minnesota pedestrian barrier wall. And so I don't want to see us repeat a project that would be similar in nature, particularly without going to impacted community councils and having a public dialogue. I don't think the type of intervention.
Would you guys be willing to share that your grant narrative?
I'm sorry, I think if you're on the phone, you need to mute.
I got it. Go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, just don't want to repeat an intervention of a similar type, given the pushback that we've had from the public. So happy to just do away with that project and maybe revisit that corridor and see what could be a meaningful intervention that actually supports active transportation users. Thank you.
So
Yep, I have a question about it. So it looks like that funding is set for FY 25. So my question is, what does that mean? Does that mean nothing's going to happen until FY 25, or is there lead up? Because there's no money before that in 23 or 24.
I can try to answer, but I may have to lean on DOT, but my understanding is it has design funding right now, so they can still continue with the design efforts. If it's removed from the TIP, they wouldn't be able to move into another phase. So it looks like they have utilities construction listed here. So they wouldn't be able to move to utilities construction until this project is added back to the TIP through another amendment.
So a follow-up question is, where are we at in design and, any outreach on the design in terms of with the community and having that conversation in terms of what it's intended to look like and be able to, is there still time and availability to get feedback on the intervention?
Yeah, I guess I could start from, Member Bowen's comments, the highway safety improvement plan is a data-driven, it's our most data-driven program, and projects are selected based on measured needs. There's definitely a crash problem in this area that we're focusing on. And the project, so we're into design, but we still have time to make adjustments. And I think I know this is going to be the subject of a joint working group with the committees. I don't know if that's been scheduled yet. But we're going to have a higher level of public participation than we typically do on HSIP projects. HSIP projects are generally smaller and they focus on specific needs. They're regularly off, they're regularly not popular, I guess, because a lot of times they just cut off shortcuts and things like that. But I guess my feeling is that we should keep the project where it's at in the TIP. And I'll commit that we will have a higher level of public participation and that we will try to come up with a solution that maybe works better for everybody in that working group meeting. And then I suppose then can make a decision after that. That help?
Can I ask one more follow-up
Yeah,
question? I
please.
guess when is that supposed to come to a conclusion where you kind of have your preferred alternative that you want to move to construction so that we would know when that money on utility construction was going to start to be spent, if it remains in the TIP?
The selection is made at the end of the conclusion of the EPA, the National Environmental Protection Act document, which is a simple document. It's a categorical exclusion. And so when that document is finalized, that's when and not even to that detail, really, I guess. We have the ability to change the details of it, right up until we're ready to advertise for construction.
I guess I'm wondering about the timing. Like right now, what's the timing of that being completed prior to 25?
How long do you think we have?
Oh, I think, we were discussing it today, and I forget the exact date, the point we're planning on moving forward to the construction of utilities, but there's absolutely time to discuss, the look and feel of this fence, the need for it. We're gonna be going out to an RFP so that we can do a robust public involvement process with this project here. And there are some unique design constraints that we're running into, similar to the unique situations that led to the Minnesota cheese grater as well. This area, like Director Holland mentioned, has a good amount of crash data. Need to do something in this area. We can't lake portions of this area due to approaches into Merrill Field, which kind of compounds, the problem that we have. So I'd like to continue through the design, continue to evaluate how we can make improvements in this area.
Okay, thanks for the information.
He's not supposed to call it a cheese grater.
It's called cheese grater, cheese grater.
Dr. Holland has his hand raised online.
Yeah, thanks. I just can't support the project moving forward with its current project description, which to me predetermines an outcome. It says that you're going to be throwing up a wall, and simply saying something is data driven, and so therefore we're going to throw a wall up. It doesn't allow pedestrians to cross and have the accessibility that they need, to me is diametrically opposed to what policy makers in Anchorage have put on the record, that we want to support active transportation users. Pedestrians choose to cross where they feel is safe for them and convenient for them. And so for me, it's not just about design and aesthetics and how it looks and feels. It's about the functionality of non-motorized users being able to get to their destination in a way that is safe and convenient for them. And so interventions that do not support those users, I think are not worth our investment via the AMATS process. And I'll just say, going back to Minnesota, not only did a wall get put up so that people can't cross, you have to go so far in between crosswalks to cross Minnesota. It divides the neighborhood. This is all within the context of everything that we're looking at when it comes to reconnecting parts of our community like Fairview that were divided by highways. And we're saying not only are we going to allow these parts of our community to continue to be divided by highways, but we're going to make it even more punitive, even more hostile to vulnerable road users. That to me is unacceptable. If this project language were paired with some type of description, some type of language that says, we're going to put in more crosswalks, we're going to put in an overpass or an underpass, or we're going to do something to support active transportation users, I could potentially get behind going through that design process. But the language as is, I don't think should move forward. And so I will be voting in support of my amendment to remove this from the TIP. Thank you.
Maybe just a quick response, that again, it's not opinion, it's data that the conditions that where most pedestrian fatalities occur are mid-block crossings, not at the controlled intersections. So this, the wall addresses that issue, but I agree with you that I think in this case, we're half a mile between crosswalks. So there may be other solutions there that we can look at. Again, I'll vote against the amendment because I think we should keep it in the TIP. If we decide that we need to change the scope at a later date, then I think that would be the appropriate time to modify the TIP. Does anybody else have any?
I have another question. Sorry, I'm trying to navigate this. Are we able to edit the description before we adopt this, if it remains?
Technically, yes.
So I want to make sure I don't get in the AMATS public involvement loop. So if a description was altered, would it have to go back out for public comment, or would it depend on the, on what was proposed?
My understanding, no. Typically, from my read of the federal regs, it has to be an unforeseen significant change to the program. So basically, adding in a brand new project that we've never heard of would be a significant. I think a description fits in line with the discussion being had as part of the public process.
Okay, so with that, I think I would like to, instead of remove it, change the description to achieve Mr. Boland's aims. What I hear is possible, and see if that is a path forward, knowing that if the design comes back and it does kind of what is suggested here and is really contrary to where municipal policy is on pedestrian access, that there's an opportunity to still remove the construction dollars.
And I think that could be a good solution, kind of depending on what the language change is.
We'll have to wait and see, but we have to deal with the First Amendment first.
Any other conversation on the First Amendment?
Thanks, quite good, Mr. Chair. I was looking at Google Earth and I think the distinction between just from looking at aerial photos, the distinction between the location of the notorious cheese grater and this location is that it's hard to tell from the project description what exactly is intended, but there are pedestrian crosswalks crossing the 5th and 6th couplet on both sides of Concrete Avenue. At Minnesota and West Northern Lights, I don't believe there is a pedestrian crosswalk on the south side of Northern Lights crossing Minnesota. So I think there is a distinction between the existing pedestrian pathways that are recognized by crosswalks at Concrete and the fact that the Minnesota location, and we're not arguing in favor or against the solution that was put there. I think the situations are different. So just to comment on that. Thank you.
Are we ready to vote on the amendment? If we are, then I think we probably need a roll call. The amendment is to remove, I'm not sure what project number that was.
It is
HSP 0014, 5th Avenue, Concrete Street to Carlock Street pedestrian improvements.
The moved amendment is to remove HSP 0014 from the current TIP. How do you vote, Ms. Zelatel?
no.
Mr. Pollitt?
No.
Mr. Boland?
Yes.
Mr. Olds?
No.
Oh, no. You help me with we're back to, are we back to an amendment or?
Yeah, so that amendment fails. So now it's back to the opportunity to make other amendments.
Okay.
I would like to go for the amendment, please. On the same project, HSP 0014, I would like to have the description read, develop and construct a pedestrian safety intervention between Concrete Street and the couplet of 5th and 6th Avenues, period, and the rest of the language would remain.
Second, for purposes of discussion.
Did you rephrase that? Sorry.
I can reread it. Yeah, it would just say, develop and construct a pedestrian safety intervention between Concrete, and then the rest remains. Just speaking briefly to it, I think that language is flexible enough to center the pedestrian
road user in the conversation instead of saying it's going to be a barrier. I think intervention, like that's that's on the fly. So if there's a better word to use, I'm certainly open to it. But the idea being that we should kind of be able to put all of the options on the table, understanding really how the utilization works. In that area, pedestrians do like to take the most convenient and direct route, but how to do so safely. And really gives the opportunity through the design process, hopefully, to balance those two significant interests versus just starting from an element of we need to stop pedestrians from doing this thing.
A motion and a second. Is there, I see Dr. Boland has his hand raised.
Thanks. You know, I guess I will cautiously support the amendment. I just think that I don't have a lot of faith that even that description change, a safety intervention does enough to bolster the fact that it needs to be supportive of non-motorized users. And I just think that this approach where, okay, we want to prevent mid-block crossings, so we're just going to throw up walls. I mean, maybe we should wall off the entirety of between the sidewalk and the street of Northern Lights and Benson in Midtown. I mean, would that be functional? Should we just put everyone in a tunnel and they can only cross at intersections? I don't know, just not a big fan of throwing up these walls to prevent pedestrians without concurrently giving them an easier means and a safer means to cross. So I don't know. I don't know if that language goes further enough, but I guess it's better than nothing. Thanks.
Any other discussion on the amendment? Please, Ms. Sexton.
So usually I'm the pessimist, so Mr. Boland and I have changed spaces for today. If there's a different language, or if I'm not speaking AMATS clear enough, which happens from time to time, right? If there is something better that really captures what the discussion has been here today, I'm open to that language. I mean, we're just kind of doing this on the fly. But I guess I want to make it really clear so that everyone in the room, and if you listen to this recording later, that the intention here is to really put all options on the table to support what Dr. Boland is saying in terms of what our policy municipality is for pedestrians while taking into account the safety considerations. And so I really encourage, if this passes, the design team to really think and engage the community, particularly the users of this space, in that conversation. Because I think that's where we've had the issues, particularly on Minnesota. There wasn't significant community engagement at the time. I understand there were some changes in staffing at DOT, and it's very different than what I've encountered previously with the Highway Safety Improvement Program. I've had a really close working relationship and a very deeply engaged prior coordinator that would be at my community councils and talking about what the possible interventions could be. And so I feel like we went from one to a project that went perhaps without the right community engagement. So here's another opportunity to reset that. So I really hope that that happens. Thank you.
Mr. Cole.
I will support the amendment. I think it's well phrased. I think that we've heard from DOT staff here in the room that they will take a more broad look at the measures that they would implement as part of this project. So I do support it. Thank you.
Please, Aaron.
Okay, thanks. I forgot to mention something earlier that might be germane to this conversation. I have been working with DOT, outreaching, and Anna Boson, the new traffic safety engineer, to talk about HSIP projects and how AMATS can be more involved. And you mentioned earlier that there was going to be an opportunity for the committees to be involved in that. We're looking at doing a work session or something with the policy committee, TAC, and inviting the subcommittees to come and talk about HSIP projects. So I think the description that was given today can help with that conversation. And the idea is to try and have that meeting soon, especially since there's a desire to kind of move quickly on this before things get too far down the road with the project description. So just be on the lookout for a doodle poll to get that work session on HSIP projects soon. Thanks.
Yeah, well, I think we're ready to vote on the amendment. The amendment is to amend project HSP 0014 to read develop and construct a pedestrian safety intervention, to add that to the project description. I think I'll just go with, do I hear any objections to approving that amendment? Hearing none, the amendment is approved. So are we back to the original motion to approve TIP amendment number 2?
There is, yes, you're back to the opportunity to make more amendments or approve the main motion as amended.
Are there any other amendments that proposed to TIP amendment number 2? You ready? So we're going to vote on the approval of TIP amendment number 2. And again, I think I can just ask for any objections to pass that motion. Hearing none, TIP amendment number 2 is passed. Is that the hard one, Aaron?
I hope so.
Action item 5C. Action item number 5C is CAC, which is Community or Advisory, Citizens Advisory Committee, Community Advisory Committee comments on Seward to Glen Pell. And presentation.
Yeah, real quick.
Okay.
So we can keep the time going. So before you are comments from the Community Advisory Committee on the Seward to Glen PEL. So very similar to AMATS staff comments. The Community Advisory Committee met on March 11th to discuss the PEL. At that meeting, the project team was there to engage in that conversation, and the project team did say they would accept comments after the due date from the CAC, which we really appreciate the comments or the project team accommodating us in our process. The CAC met and developed the comments that you see before you. There are 3 pages of comments. I'm not going to go through all of them unless you have specific questions, but I think it's raising concerns from the CAC regarding the plan that are pretty similar to what you've heard from other groups and organizations and even AMATS staff, that, you know, that making sure that there's, you know, reducing impact to the community and accounting for all options and everything like that. So the TAC reviewed this and recommended releasing these comments to the project team so they can be part of the public record, but also making sure everybody is very clear that they're not coming from the policy committee itself, unless the policy committee votes on that, and just provide that distinct clarification. There was also a request by the TAC that at some point AMATS as a whole get together and talk about how comments are addressed from subcommittees, AMATS in general. We have the CAC comments, the BPAC ones are next, AMATS staff had their comments. So we have 3 different comments that are going out to the project, and the technical advisory committee was also unsure of what is their role in these comments coming forward. Are they supposed to be making changes if they see something that they don't agree with or, you know, don't technically think is accurate? Or are they supposed to just leave the comments as is so they're part of the public record? So I think at some point we'll all get together to kind of talk about how comments are held. I will be honest, with the current staff shortages or upcoming staff shortages at AMATS, I will not be able to put that together for a little while. So I apologize on that, but it will not be forgotten. And the recommendation is to approve these comments to the project team. Thank you.
Are there any questions, comments from the committee? I see Dr. Boland online.
Oh, sorry, gotta turn off mute. Thank you. I guess my thought is, I'm curious why comments from other committees, AMATS committees, were funneled through the technical advisory committee before coming to the policy committee. My understanding is that all of the committees, whether that's the CAC or BPAC or the TAC, are advisory to the policy committee. And so I think if there was sort of maybe a difference of opinions or whatever, it's, or facts on the ground or whatever it is, it's sort of up to the policy committee to sort those things out, not up to the technical advisory committee. So, you know, they could provide their findings or their set of comments to us, just like any other committee could. And so, yeah, I guess just curious why the work of one committee was brought to another committee for some sort of sign off or input before coming to us.
Yeah, I can help answer that. So as part of our public participation plan, we list that all committees, all the subcommittees go through the technical advisory committee, and staff goes through the technical advisory committee before going to the policy committee. It was a decision that was made years ago by the policy committee that everything is funneled through the TAC before it goes to the policy committee. If there is a desire to change that, that is up to the will of the policy committee if you would like. But it is the technical advisory committee's role to kind of review everything and give their technical perspective before it goes to the policy committee.
At this point, the TAC didn't modify any of the comments, and I would think even if we decided to do that in the future, there would be track changes or something so that we could see the modification.
So, you know, what we have recently done is, regardless of what the TAC recommends or approves or disapproves or whatever, everything comes to the policy committee for final approval. So if the TAC had looked at this and said, we don't want this going forward, okay, we'll note your comments, your action, but it's still going to the policy committee for approval. So the TAC is just kind of another layer to get information before it comes to the policy committee, to try and give as much information to the policy committee as possible.
Are there any other questions or comments from the committee? Hearing seeing none. Are there any comments from the public? Hearing or seeing none, what is the will of the committee?
Move to accept or we approve them.
Yeah, that's kind of the weird thing. The recommendation is to approve them to be released from the community advisory committee.
Move to do what Aaron's told us to do.
Second.
By Zelto, seconded by Cole Hayes. Do I hear any objections to approving the motion? Whatever Aaron said. Hearing none. That motion is approved. Very similar. Action item 5D is the BPAC, which, like PED Advisory Committee, moving those comments on the Seward to Glen Pell onto the project team. Presentation.
I'll pass it over to Chelsea, who can do a quick update on this, but it's very similar to the CAC.
Chelsea Wardwaller, Senior Planner with AMATS, and I'm staff to the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. As you just saw with the Community Advisory Committee comments, the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee also compiled comments. Again, they were very similar to comments that you've seen before. They met with the project team on February 27th with a special meeting, and then during their regular meeting, they presented a couple committee members came together to compile these comments, and they were presented to the committee on March 11th. And it was approved. And then the TAC, similar again to the Community Advisory Committee comments, recommended approval to release these comments to the project team.
Thank you, Chelsea. Are there any questions, comments from the committee? Hearing, seeing none. Any comments from the public? Hearing, seeing none. What is the will of the committee?
Move to release and forward the comments from the BPAC to the project team.
Second.
Mr. Cole Hayes, seconded by Ms. Zelito. Are there any objections to approving the motion? Hearing, seeing none, the motion is approved. Action item 5E is the Alaska Railroad 2024 Transit Asset Management, or TAM, performance targets. We have a presentation on that.
Just real quick. So as you may remember, back in the day in MAP 21, which feels like an eon ago, there were federal requirements for performance measures and targets. States providers of public transportation and MPOs are required to set targets for those performance measures. Before you are the transit asset management targets from the Alaska Railroad. So these are coming forward for the 24 time period. And the targets are, can you go ahead and scroll down to the table, are before you in 2024. Just so you note that these targets are related to useful life benchmarks. So my understanding, and I'm sure hopefully somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, the lower the number, the better. So if you look at the passenger rail cars, it says 0%. Basically what they're saying is that by, for their target, they're going to have 0% of their passenger rail cars that exceed their useful life benchmark. Since AMATS itself does not fund any of these projects, it's all money from the Alaska Railroad itself. The recommendation is to adopt the targets that the Alaska Railroad has set, and those are listed on the table here. We last adopted these targets in 2022, and I believe as part of the attachment, you can see the 23 information with the target and the actual year end. So I guess it was 23 last saw these. I apologize. You can see the targets. Go ahead and scroll down a little more. There we go. The 23 targets and then the 23 actual year end numbers. Since these are Alaska Railroad funded, we're recommending to adopt their targets as they have them set before you. Thank you.
Questions or comments from the committee for Aaron? Not seeing any comments from the public. Not seeing any of those either. What's the will of the committee?
Different.
Approved. Second. Second by Polish. Are there any objections to approving the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved. On to action item 5F. There's a AMATS letter of support for a DOT PPPP grant application. Do you have a presentation?
Yes, it's just fun, the acronyms. Okay, so this is a letter of support. Department of Transportation did reach out to AMATS at the last meeting for the TAC, asking for a letter of support for this prioritization process pilot program, the 4 Ps. The idea here, and please DOT correct me if I'm wrong, is to develop a more transparent STIP scoring and ranking process. And that's what this 4P is to develop these processes to help with transparency. So getting the public more involved, getting other agencies involved, etc. So before you is that letter of support. I do want to note part of our letter of support is wording in there for our MPO to be given an opportunity to have a seat at the table as this process is developed. So when we mean our MPO, it's not staff, it's you as the policy committee, in some way, shape, or form, be given an opportunity to participate in developing this process to help with that open and transparent aspect of it. Technical Advisory Committee reviewed this letter and recommended support. It is before you today. I do want to thank DOT for their assistance with this. Just so you know, it was pretty last minute notice. The NOFO was released February 22nd with an application due date of May 1st. And so it's a pretty short turnaround to get this moving forward. So I can help answer any questions on my end, but regarding the actual application and grant, what's being put in, DOT will have to provide that information. And so this is before you for approval. Thank you.
Do we know what the magnitude of the grant request is? How much money? Just curious.
I think it's a small dollar figure. It's pretty, relatively speaking, small, but I think DOT would have to help answer.
You know, James?
Yeah, James Starzik, DOT Planning Chair. You're asking how much money is available?
Yeah.
This is off the top of my head, so bear with me. I believe the max amount that is available per application is $2 million. And the total amount available for this round is, I believe, $60 million. Okay. Yeah.
Any other comments from the committee? Questions? Any comments, questions from the public? Not seeing any. Will of the committee.
Move to move to approve the letter of support.
By Ms. Fuentes, seconded by Ms. Zelto.
Just a second, sir. We do have, I think Jason Olds online had a question.
Okay.
No, I was just gonna move to advance Quad P.
Any objections to approving the motion? Hearing none, that motion is approved. Is that the last of the action items?
Yes, it is, sir. Thank you.
The agenda item 6A, which is the first quarter obligation report. That's when you have a report.
Oh, yes, we do have a report and a half. So, okay, everybody. So as you know, every quarter we are required to have our obligation report. And we have targets in there. For the first quarter, we're required to be plus or minus 15% of our overall allocation. So this report was put together based on admin mod number 2, which is the latest approved version of the TIP. It does not reflect the amendment to you. That was just approved by the committee, as that still has to go through DOT's approval process and FHWA's approval process. So based on admin mod 2 and the project slips, this obligation report is going to look a little rough. As you see up here, the difference is minus 52.37%. So basically that means if amendment 2 is not approved and acted upon, and we only have admin mod 2 to work on, we're anticipating about $26.6 million not being obligated in this fiscal year. So that's part of that discussion of what happens if amendment 2 is delayed and not moved forward on. Again, I will reiterate, even if this happens, the anticipated effect is that money will be carried forward for obligation into future use. So, project slips happen, and that's why we typically do amendments to help address those project slips. And as we said, one of the big ones is downtown trail connection. We're trying to move forward as quickly as we can on everything else. We're moving forward on the FTA funding, or the transfer of FHWA to FTA funding to help with our transit, our partner. So we're keeping that moving forward, as well as anything else that we can get done in our time period. I can go through individual things if you need, but that is the overall outline of it. Thank you.
Questions from the committee for Aaron? About comments from the public? I think we can move on to agenda item 6B, which is the project status report by Q1.
Yes, so as we do now with every quarter, thankfully, we are given a project status update prepared by DOT, James Starzik at DOT, working with me and all the other project managers to get that information in here. So these are the AMATS funded projects that you see in this document here, and it's just giving you a quick update on all those projects. Once you review it, we will post it to the AMATS website so people can see it on the front page of the Muni AMATS website and get that kind of routine update on projects. I don't have too much to share on this, but James and I will be here to help answer any questions if you have them. Thank you.
Does the committee have any comments or questions on the status report?
I do, yeah.
So
how do you, we just made a bunch of amendments, so I assume you're gonna have to go back and update this pretty quick, because like I'm looking at the, or maybe it does align, but like the Academy Vanguard area improvements, does it take into account the amendments we just passed, or does it need to be updated? Is it already got a stale shelf life?
Through the chair, James Starzik at DOT. This is reflective of the status of the projects at the end of the first quarter, as you can see on the title page here, which would have been December 31st.
Okay.
So as of December 31st, this is the project status. I'm currently developing the second quarter, which would be as of March 31st. But of course, I mean, this isn't a legal document. I could fudge it a little bit, just take the best available information and get it in there. And which is probably where I'll go with that. And so it'll be, second quarter asterisk.
That's great. And
this is a really great report. I want to be able to share it, particularly with my community councils who are tracking projects. Be really great if under first quarter, it could actually have a date because they're not probably tracking its first quarter of the federal fiscal year, even though you have FFY 2024. Nobody in the real world knows what that means. And then that way I can use it as a tool, like Academy Vanguard's a great example. I have a community council that asks every month, is there any change? And it's been really great to point them to this place.
Yeah, certainly. I'd be happy to make that addition. Also, through comments from the TAC, I'm working on adding non-AMATS funded projects in here. So work on getting in some of those DOT projects, including like the HSIP projects that you've been discussing. So start to add those in to give more of a comprehensive report.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Not seeing any. How about the public? Any questions or comments from the public? Not seeing any. I guess Aaron, any further project or plan updates?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. On to committee comments. Does anybody have any comments? See ya. How about public comments? Anybody from the public like to make a comment? Please, Jamie.
Jamie Acton, Public Transportation Department Director. I just wanted to get on the record that we are currently in a open house from April 3rd to May 3rd for the downtown transit center site selection study. So we are trying to gather as much feedback as we possibly can, and just wanted to put that on the record.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else? Yeah, please.
So I just wanted to make a little announcement of some change at AMATS. Since she is here, I can put her on the spot. As I announced at the TAC, but Chelsea Wardwall will be leaving AMATS in a couple weeks or so. She has accepted another job at in PM&E. So we're very excited to see that she will stay with the municipality of Anchorage and bring that energy to another group. We will continue to work with Chelsea a lot. So you haven't seen the last of her. I will be dragging her to as many meetings as I can. And I just want to thank Chelsea so much for everything. She's been very good at working on challenging our kind of normal concepts of transportation and pushing ideas, pushing us to think more and try more things. So I'm really excited to see what she can do for PM&E, and we will work very closely. So thank you, Chelsea.
Congratulations, Chelsea. I was gonna say we'll miss you, but we'll see you around. Any other comments? And I'm not hearing any. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A second?
Second is Mr. Paul. Are there any objections to approving that motion? Hearing none. The motion is approved and the meeting is adjourned at 2:23 PM.
Thank you.